Welcome to the National Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast, the latest news on California sports betting. My name is Ashley Cope, and I'm the marketing manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I just wanted to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question or chat box and they'll be brought up at the end. This session will also be recorded and available on our website. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Victor Rocha, Conference Chairman of the National Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Victor Rocha. I'm the Conference Chairman for the National Indian Gaming Association. My co-host, Jason Giles, is stuck on the Hill in Washington, D.C. As you know, sometimes it's not the best place to be stuck. And also my friend, Brendan Bussman, is not going to be here this morning. He also got stuck in a meeting. He's involved in Chicago, which is probably a whole other story with gaming. But more importantly, the star of the day is here, my dear friend, Jill Dorson from SportsHandle. Jill, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Again, you know what, this is this particular show, we're going to be talking about California sports betting. So that's why I dress like a typical Californian.
Not why.
Typical Californian sports bettor, even though that, listen, this is the way I dress all the time. I believe in looking homeless, since that's what this bill is going to be, or that's what's, the big issue in California right now. But Jill, so let's talk about California sports betting. So big week this week, or big week last week. On Friday, we got a bomb dropped on us. Could you tell us what happened?
So two things happened on Friday, although we didn't find out about one of them until I think Monday, if you're outside the tribal community. But on Friday, a group of 43 California tribes came out against two ballot initiatives that are in process in California, the Card Room Initiative and the, let's call it, Commercial Initiative. And it was a surprise, I think, to the operators that this group of tribes decided that they were not going to work with the operators on the operators initiative. And on the same day, unbeknownst to me anyway, a group of 3 tribes started circulating among the tribal community a proposed referendum that would allow for online gaming statewide in California. So
and this is, we're talking about mobile too, right?
Yeah, online mobile.
Yeah, and I think there were rumors and there were conversations and stuff. As a person who has kind of privilege sometimes of these conversations, I think it's always fascinating when a conversation turns into reality, and I think this was a case. But what are the tribes asking for?
I actually think it's a really interesting initiative taken on its own. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to work out in the bigger picture and whether or not any of the groups putting forth initiatives ultimately could work together. But in general, it's a statewide mobile wagering bill, initiative proposal that would allow for the tribes to partner with operators and allow mobile wagering across California, which obviously biggest market in the United States, so no small thing. It carries most of the things that other initiatives or bills have carried, including allowing betting on college, professional, and amateur sports, setting the age at 21. And all of that kind of stuff. There's a few things I found really interesting about it. One of them is that the tribes in this case would be in charge of the bet menu, which in most other jurisdictions, if let's say the NFL thinks that there's a particular kind of bet or a particular event that they don't want bet on, they can go to the regulator and ask them to consider whether or not it's wagered on. And in California, if this initiative were to go forward, that decision actually would be made by the tribes. The tribes also did not include a data mandate, which only exists, I think, in about 3 states. So there's no need to use official league data if this becomes the law. And so those are, not small things. The tribes are basically saying to the leagues, we're going to do what we want to do, which is similar actually to what the Oneidas in Wisconsin did. When you had Brandon on a couple of weeks ago, he talked about standing up to corporate America and doing things the way that they want to do things. This initiative calls for one skin per tribe, which means that there would be one mobile application per tribe. And I believe there's 70, no, there's more than 100, sorry, about 70 tribes, right, with more than 100 casinos in the state. The other thing that's interesting is that the initiative specifically says that the application must be branded by the tribe, or something that the tribe owns. So my interpretation of that is that, for example, Victor, if your tribe, Pechanga, decided to partner with DraftKings to run a mobile application, that it would not be branded DraftKings, it would be branded Pechanga. And we've seen that actually in Connecticut in particular, where I believe they're sharing branding with DraftKings and FanDuel, the tribes there. But I think that in states where tribes have a big presence and a big brand, and California is certainly one of those when it comes to gaming, that the tribes want to keep that, and they don't want to give away, the public face of things to a corporate, to corporate America.
Yeah, you see that, my tribe, particularly Pechanga, does have deals with a lot of the major tribes. San Manuel has a big licensing deal over in Nevada and stuff like that, and other ones up in Northern California too. So they have these long-term relationships with the leagues and stuff like that. And more importantly, they've spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars on branding. And, a name like Pechanga might not mean anything outside of Southern California, probably might not even mean anything in Northern California, but in Southern California, it carries a lot of weight. And so I think that's probably where that angle is. What do you think about that? That's kind of interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think it's interesting, particularly because in Connecticut, that's what we're starting to see, the retail sports books at Foxwoods and Mohegan have either the FanDuel or the DraftKings name in it, but the tribe's name is part of the sports book as well. And I think it's relevant. In New England, for example, Foxwoods was the first casino. I grew up in New Hampshire, so I remember in the 80s when people were driving to Connecticut to go play the slots and poker and everything else. And they have a brand and people know who they are and they trust them. And I think, speaking for myself in Southern California, Pechanga, Pala, the Valley View Casino. I mean, I know all the casino names. And if that's the case, then I think it's smart for the tribes to then brand going forward anything sports betting on their names.
Yeah, and kind of really a deeper issue here. It really is about erasure and making sure that your name isn't just off of the next generation of gambling, which is going to be online. So it really is. We're very sensitive to that fact, and especially in California where they've tried so hard to erase us from. So for us, we're very sensitive to that too. It's not really, it's important. We want people to know our name. I mean, look at this recent deal with San Manuel where they just rebranded their casino and their name, and that's really about putting their culture front and forward and letting people know, listen, we're more than just a casino. We're a people. We're a tribe. We're a culture. We're not a brand. So that's kind of where that comes from, and it's something we're very proud of. But I think some people could see it differently, as maybe those Indians are just trying to blah blah blah. But it really is, like you say, in Connecticut, the name DraftKings, the name FanDuel, it carries weight. You want people to come into just like anything else too. So this makes it challenging. One of the things that's really interesting, what you just said, is in your article you mentioned that it takes a little while to get this thing qualified for the ballot. I think the other initiative, the homeless one by the Sports Betting Consortium, they're kind of a little ahead of the game. They're already done. I think they're very close to getting that done. What have you heard about that?
Well, I mean, obviously it's going to be a really interesting landscape. There's two other ballot initiatives separate from the tribal retail initiative, which is 100% already on the ballot. So there's 3 mobile online gaming initiatives that are or 2 in process, and then the tribal one that came out on Monday. That should be filed next week, according to the letter. So the first one that was filed is the card rooms initiative, which would allow for wagering, digital wagering across California in card rooms or whatever, tethered to card rooms and horse race tracks. And I believe that includes professional sports stadiums. And that one has already gotten what's called the title and summary here. And so it's available to be circulated and get signatures. And you need just about 1 million signatures. I think it's 163,000 to get on the ballot. The initiative put forth by the operators, which is statewide mobile wagering, requires that any operator be tethered to a tribal casino, does not allow professional sports teams at the moment to be part of that. That initiative should have its title and summary actually by tomorrow, was the deadline for that. And then they can start circulating to get signatures. So 100%, and it was pointed out in the letter by the 3 tribes that circulated starting on Friday. It's a little bit of a tighter deadline for them, but I don't think it's super tight. And I say that because in total, it can take 65 days from the day you file your proposal until it gets the title and summary. It could take less. It doesn't normally, but let's assume 65 days puts us in the middle of January to the beginning of February. And in California, you don't have to have those signatures put together until June. So it's a pretty long runway, about the same actually as the operating initiative in Florida. Their deadline is earlier. It's the beginning of January, and they just started collecting signatures, I believe, in August. So, February to June is pretty similar. But, it's going to be just like in Florida. It's going to be a fight for all of the people who are running initiatives to hire people to gather signatures and to get out there and get their message across and the right message so that you have people signing and ultimately supporting your initiative and not just conceptually the idea of digital sports betting.
Wow. So everyone's in signature gathering mode too. So, I was talking with someone and we were guesstimating the costs, and it's got to be anywhere between $10 to $15 million. I think when you get another one, we could probably go up to $20 million for signature gathering. I mean, that is a lot of money,
And it might not even be enough. I mean, you probably already know this, but the 7 operators that initially went forward with the operators or the commercial ballot initiative put in $100 million. To gather signatures and do advertising. And I'm told that they're willing to double that if they need to. So from, the day that they decided to do this until the election, if they get on the ballot, they're willing to spend $200 million to get entree into California, which tells you an awful lot about how valuable people think this market will be.
But if the tribes do qualify for this with this other or get enough signatures to get on the ballot, you're going to have 2 competing ideas. And, I think one of the things that I saw the other day where I think my cousin said, Chairman McCarroll, that, the tribes in California have won every ballot initiative except one. And that's when there was 2 of them on the issue. And so, I think part of the strategy with the tribes has always been this, knowing that if it gets crowded, you just, we'll just shut it down and wait a couple more years and, wait till a better climate and stuff like that. And I think the people of California, what's important to people to know is that this isn't done in a vacuum. There has been a lot of polling. There has been a lot of testing, the messaging and stuff like that. So this isn't something that's being done by happenstance. It's very much, it's got surgical focus on it. And, I think we're going to have a very interesting 2022, but more importantly, I think that during the Christmas time and during these holidays, if hopefully they get the supply chain thing figured out so people can go out there in Christmas and they can sign on those signature ballots and stuff.
Yeah, we can go to Target and hand over our signature. But it's
and that's the other thing, when the tribes had this issue or when they were doing this in 20 years ago, they use their casinos. You know what I mean? They already have a built-in audience. They have customers coming in and they're coming in all day long and the messaging and stuff like that. And then when they're in the casino already, they're in a really kind of a favorable mood already. So I've seen this strategy in play before, and they know how to get the signatures and stuff like that. So what response are you hearing? What was the response from the other side, not necessarily the tribal side?
So I think that there was surprise on Friday at the letter that came out from the 43 tribes saying we're not going to support either of these. And I think, if you're a savvy business person, which, the people who run at and work at places like DraftKings and FanDuel and PointsBet and BetMGM, they all are, they knew that something else was coming. They didn't know what it was, but, certainly going to the effort of coming out and saying, we're not going to support you, probably meant that there was another shoe to drop. And when that shoe dropped on Monday, there were a fair number of people, I think, in the industry who were surprised, who believed really that they have had conversations with particular tribes. And I've been told by several operators early on in this that the commercial operators never would have gone forward with their initiative plans if they didn't think that they had at least some amount of tribal support. So for a group of tribes to come back a few months later and not just say, we're not going to support you, but to put forth their own, changes the game. I also heard from at least one operator that from their perspective, if you read the letter from the 3 tribes on Monday, it's put a little bit of panic's too strong of a word, but I guess stress on the tribes to look at this and say, okay, we really need to do something. And, generally the public face of the tribes here in California has been, we'll take our time and we'll do it the way we want to do it. The letter clearly indicates that time is of the essence. And I think it also indicates if the commercial operators really do believe that they have 1 tribe, 2 tribes, or whatever number it is, who are interested in still talking to them, that it does create or potentially could create a divide among the tribal community. And I think if that happens, just in terms of where we go with the ballot initiatives and how it plays out, that potentially is, I guess, where the issue is, right? If some tribes are backing a tribal initiative and some tribes are backing a commercial initiative, who do you believe, if you're a voter? So.
Right. Well, listen, from my experience, that's wishful thinking. I think what you have here is just the tribes. This is more a response to the commercial gaming guys than it is a divide among the tribes. It's just a difference in how to approach it. It's the tribes feel they better come out and strike first than leave things to happenstance. And also on the fact that, the tribes have a different perspective on time. Listen, their strategy all this time, this is kind of ironic because the strategy all along has been, okay, you get retail sports betting and you take a year or 2 and then you bring in mobile, and if they're going to fight it, it's going to fall into that timeline anyhow. All that money wasted for nothing. You know what I mean?
Well, the tribal initiative actually follows that timeline because it wouldn't allow for mobile to go live until September 2023. So assuming that the retail initiative passes in November as well, you guys, my understanding from talking to you and other tribal leaders is that you could open retail sports books pretty quickly, potentially even by the Super Bowl. So you wouldn't have that year or 2 years of retail live before you went with mobile, but you'd have a good 6-8 months to get your feet on the ground and figure out what works and what doesn't.
And by the way, I put the letter up in the chat, and also, let me put up Jill's article for you too, because it really is well written, and it gives you an idea. And that's one of the reasons why I brought in Jill, because she's just so smart. It's just really fun to read her writing. All right, here's Jill's article, everyone. I just put it in the chat. And then also, you know what? You must be a machine, Jill, because I read the articles that you write, and they're so well written and so depth. And I've told this story before, but when Jill and I first met, she emailed me and said, "I'm a new writer for sports betting," and I said, "So what?" And
actually, you said, "I'll never be a source for you."
I don't want to be a source. Don't call me. Don't talk to me. Then I read her work. I was like, "Oh, this is a real journalist." Okay, and I called her back. I was like, "Listen, I'm sorry. And but listen, I appreciate the craft. I mean, there's nothing better than a well-written article. You know what I mean? For somebody who went to J school and they know how to do it. And as someone who's a hack, I admire great writing. And so you're a great writer, and I do enjoy it. I'm not sure everyone is. You bring a lot to the game, Jill. You know what I mean? And I think I would like to do a show talking about media and talking about gaming, and the fact that a lot of great writers are now, the death of the American newspaper, and the rise of modern journalism online, stacked and stuff like this too. So that's definitely an issue that I want to go down later on down the road. And I'd love for you to talk about that later on down the road. But what I would like to talk about, again, you wrote this amazing article this morning about Florida and Florida sports betting. And I see a lot of parallels here. I see tribes being very bold, moving first, being the first mover. And we talked before that, when I read an article about Facebook this morning, they were talking about how the move fast, break things mentality. And Jesus, there's such an example to follow. Yet when the tribes do this, it's like, oh, those darn Indians, how dare they not wait their turn? And yet in Florida, it's fascinating how the strategy seems to be playing out. And very similar is where the tribes have taken the step and saying everything is going to go through us. We have exclusivity, and we're going to keep exclusivity. And what you're seeing really is the tribes taking these bold steps for securing the future of gaming for themselves and for the state, which is the next generation of gambling, which is online and mobile. So what do you see the parallels here? Is it still too early, or is it obviously there's a lot here, man?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of parallels. I mean, obviously the tribes are different, but on the flip side of things, the operators are the same. I mean, I think the biggest difference between Florida and California is in Florida, you have one tribe. So there's no breaking ranks, and there's no, negotiating amongst your own community to figure out what you want. The Seminoles have long had exclusivity on gaming in Florida. They know exactly what they want to do and where they want to go with that. And they were able to find a, governor who looked upon expanding gaming favorably, and they rewrote their compact in a way that has brought a ton of challenges. And it'll be interesting to see, if they survive those challenges. Some of them are legal, and then just like in California, some of them are going to come through a ballot referendum, because the operators there are essentially putting up the same sort of initiative proposal that they put up here in California. It's statewide mobile gaming that doesn't have to run through the Seminoles. A key difference, I guess, one is that, or several key differences, the Seminoles went live on Monday with digital sports betting. And so as of Monday, any digital sports bet made anywhere in the state of Florida must run through the Seminole server. And from the beginning, that created a lot of angst among the operators, because putting your software or working together and putting your tech stack on somebody else's server is not a simple thing. It's also, there's proprietary issues, right? If I'm PointsBet, do I really want to expose myself to Hard Rock by, putting my tech stack on their server? And I'm sure that there's controls in place, and that I do not know enough about that. But all of the operators told me that kind of challenge is the trickiest of all of them. And then, of course, they'd have to pay a percentage to the Seminoles, so their business model changes. From the Seminole side, of course, it's fantastic, right? Any bet in the state goes not only through their server, but if it goes through a company that is not Hard Rock, they still get a percentage. So they've been very aggressive in what they wanted. I had one law professor tell me, this has been 40 years in the making. That the Seminoles, dating back to 1979 with their high stakes bingo hall, have, slowly and carefully crafted what it is that they want. And in 2006 or 2007, they bought the Hard Rock brand. So in Florida, for example, you won't find the, Pachanga or the Foxwoods. You'll find Hard Rock, and everyone knows the Hard Rock brand. It's international. But they also know in Florida that it's part of the Seminole companies. So I think, what happens on Friday with the hearing, there's a hearing where two pari-mutuels have sued the state and the Department of the Interior, saying that the compact is basically illegal, that it went around voters in Florida. What happens Friday will be interesting. I talked with 2 law professors who feel very strongly that one single federal judge is not going to decide to overturn the compact. But it's entirely possible that it could then be appealed and it could go to appellate court. And there you have a panel of judges. And so, maybe it's a little bit more comfortable for the judges to dig in and have a different opinion. But either way, the genie's out of the bottle because you can already bet. So
it's amazing when you go through it and you read the language. It's almost like Escher-ish in the sense that they prepared for every possibility, and I mean look back in California. The sports betting bill by the card clubs, that says if they get it, 51%, then so they've written it so that everyone's always trying to gauge in the system, I guess.
Well, that's another, Victor, huge difference between California and Florida, just since you mentioned the 51%. No matter how many initiatives make a ballot in California, if any one of them gets 51% of the vote, it becomes law. The bar's higher in Florida, and the initiative there from the operators, they would need 60% to pass. And there's a very heavy no casino or in non-Indian gaming. I don't know how to phrase that.
Yeah, the anti-gaming. They're pretty much, they don't like gaming, period. I don't think it has.
Oh no, but the Seminoles also are coming out and lobbying against the operator.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant. There's two pretty hefty lobbies backed by Disney and the Seminole tribe that will, lobby against that if they do get the amount of signatures that they need to get on the ballot.
Well, you bring a really interesting point, which is this Hunger Games type of approach to 51%, and that really is going to make a fascinating environment to run this campaign in, so even for someone like me who doesn't watch sports, I think we're going to be seeing the effect of these campaigns pretty much everywhere, but 51%, then that means you got a real dogfight here, and I think that's where you're getting that sense of urgency from the tribes for this fourth bill or initiative, I should say, which is that sense of urgency, which is really, we need to get in front of this and not leave anything to chance. Now, what about the bill that the tribes don't like? What is it? The sports betting consortium really seemed to have gone out of their way to make sure that tribes were comfortable. And like you said, they thought they were doing the right thing. It was coming through. I'd heard they were reaching out. I've heard a couple different stories. I've heard they reached out, but I heard there was really no input from the tribe. It was like, here's what we got, so there wasn't really real. But then, I'm not everywhere, you know what I mean? So it would be interesting to see who was in there, but what is it that the tribes don't like about that bill?
Well, I guess maybe better to start with what they potentially do like, which is that the operators wrote this bill and required that they be tethered to a tribal casino, which means that there's no sports betting that doesn't run through a tribe in California if that initiative goes forward. So I think for the operators, that was a huge step, because if you look across the country, probably half of the states, operators are tethered to an existing casino, and the other half they're not, or there's potentially a requirement that they don't have to be, but it's an extra expense for them either way, right? Because they have to share with whoever or pay a fee to whoever they're tethered with. So the idea initially that they came forward and said, we're going to put out this bill and we're going to agree to be tethered to the or initiative, not bill. We keep doing that.
I know.
But put forth something that tethers us to the tribes, I think was a big step for the operators. And I think that they, truly believe, I have not been in the room, obviously, any more than you have been when there have been conversations going on, but they certainly feel like they've had conversations with some of the biggest tribes in California and that they have backing from them. And it's entirely possible that they still have that, and that this other initiative is, a separate group of tribes, as it were. But what I heard at G2E a couple of weeks ago, when there was a panel with your tribal chairman and James Siva from the California Nations Indian Gaming Association, is that it just didn't come far enough. That there was conversation, but that conversation wasn't complete. And the tribes didn't have enough opportunity to say what it is that they wanted. And I actually really believe that on both sides, right? The tribes are used to, in California and probably most other places, but in California, moving forward and doing things the way that they want to do things. And, DraftKings and FanDuel as the examples are two very big companies with very bold, very aggressive strategies who have gone forward and done things the way that they want to do things. And I think that when you put two groups of people like that together, it's easy for there to be a miscommunication or for there to just be somebody to say, okay, I'm going to take my marbles and go home because they're not doing what I want to do. But James's point was well taken, that they didn't necessarily feel like they'd been heard, or at least heard enough. And there was concern on that panel about sovereignty for the tribes and whether or not they would lose, not lose their sovereignty, but lose some respect, I think, for their sovereignty. And, that they might lose out, additionally in terms of money and jobs and, all of the things that you've shared with me and Rodney Butler in Connecticut has graciously shared with me are really important to tribes. Your end game is different. It's supporting people, it's continuing the traditions, it's, setting up things for the future. The operators have a wholly different, theory or view of what they want to do. And, their businesses, their companies, and they want to make money. And, I think at some point it's hard to put those two things together when you're coming at it from different places. I mean, it's why the Seminoles were so smart to buy a brand like Hard Rock. Because now they have that company, as it were, that commercial presence, but they can still move forward in the fashion that they want to move forward.
Right. Absolutely. It's going to be an interesting year. I think you do have a united tribal front. I think it's when push comes to shove, the tribes understand what's at stake here. I think, the commercial, like you said, the commercial gaming guys have different and different end game here. And the tribes in California have had exclusivity for gaming for over 20 years now. And so, they don't want to lose that, and they will take this fight to the mat. Now, one of the interesting things is now you have DraftKings and FanDuel and this consortium having to fight now on both fronts. Two tribes who are very, very, or two groups of tribes, one group and two, you know what I mean, who are also very politically astute and know the game, they know to play game, and they also understand what's at stake with a win and a defeat. I think what's important, a lot of us who've been around for a long time remember the California iPoker Wars, where poker stars came in being very bold and very, we're going to come in and we're going to do it because we're poker stars and we're the world's, largest iPoker company in the world. And they got chewed up. They sat and it was like Verdun or something like that, World War I. They just got chewed up, and at the very end, they were just spit out, they exploded, and they haven't been the same ever since. So not that this is going to happen, but these type of events happen, this far. And, for me, again, being around a long time, I remember, one of the big stories in gaming has always been in Atlantic City when it first started. They wanted to make sure that ballets didn't have a monopoly on the industry in Atlantic for slot machines. So they came where they had legislation that said, you can only have so many ballet slot machines on the floor. And IGT ended up coming in and then becoming a dominant leader of the industry in slot machines, which has since, that's been changing, Aristocrat and stuff like that. So these things happen in the industry where you have these big deals like this, and a leader can get their head chopped off and another one appears, and that's the way commerce is in this world. So it's fascinating to me to see how this is happening. It could have the effect, if the tribes win in both states, that would be amazing. You know what I mean? And the tribes need to win in both states too. So how it happens, whether the tribal initiative with sports betting without mobile or whatever in Arizona, I think it's the tribes understand that these are existential type fights that need to be won, and the type of victories that need to be shown, because the tribes they can't back down, so it's a little crazy talking like this, but as a Native American, as someone involved in, the National Game Association, that's kind of how we see this thing. And so, the tribes, I guess my point is the tribes aren't going to roll over for it. And, hopefully there is some type of compromise later. Now, that's a good point. Now, one of the issues, Jill, is there are talks now. What does this cause? It causes a lot of confusion. And one of the things that I have heard is that there's possible that it's created an opportunity in the legislature. What are you hearing about that?
I would say you're one step ahead of me, because I haven't heard anything about that. But I would say, and kind of going right back to the power that the tribes have, there's been no success in the legislature here in California. Right. There's been no appetite from a tribal standpoint for the legislature to dictate what sports betting is going to look like, any more than it would be for the commercial operators too. So, I mean, I guess from a legislative standpoint, to me, it doesn't make any sense for somebody to bring forth a bill. The tribes have killed 2 bills in the last 2 years, right? Or is it 3? And it's my taxpayer money being spent for those bills to come forward and then to get killed. And, from a tribal perspective, of course, it's just more money out the door, killing something else. And so, not that is not okay or is favorable, but my point is I just don't see, there hasn't been a change in who the legislators are. So that means there hasn't been a change in climate or discussions. To me, it doesn't make any sense to go down that road again here in California. But, who knows? And well, I guess the answer to that question is, it seems to be right around June over the last 2 years that there have been bills filed, and that there have been things discussed about sports betting in the legislature. And June is right when we'll find out which of the initiatives is going to make the ballot. So, strictly from like a, I don't know, money sense, if I'm the legislature, why jump into that fray if there's going to be 3 or 4 initiatives on the ballot already? Wait and let that play out and see what happens. The opportunity might come next year if none of those pass.
I seem to remember an iPoker bill being introduced the day before Christmas, like about 7 or 8 years ago or something like that too.
Could be.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think the conventional wisdom is that if everything gets defeated, there's an opportunity here in the legislature.
I would agree with that.
I think that's where the thinking is. But again, like you said, that's been a hard road to sow, and that's why the tribes went the initiative route in the first place, because they weren't just getting the satisfaction. Right. And as you say, that saying about sausage making, it goes even twice as much in California. It's just an old sausage factory. So, well,
one of the questions that I have is that reading the proposal headed by the Rincon tribe that came out on Monday, the 3 tribes, I believe that actually includes retail sports betting in it, if I read it correctly. And so one of the things that I was wondering, and I don't know if you have the answer to this or a thought, the initiative that's already on the ballot is retail only sports betting at tribal casinos. And then there potentially now could be this second tribal initiative that would include mobile and retail. So if that's the case, do you all as tribes across California kind of ditch the original one and put your money behind one that includes retail and mobile? Or do you push forward 2 initiatives, which if they both pass are kind of redundant?
It's all got to play out, man. I think what we'll see is the tribes to get around one. You know what I mean? I think, but wouldn't be surprising to see if they bring them both. It's probably not an ideal situation. I think the original plan is the plan they wanted to stick to, but I think there was a real sense of urgency created with the consortium bill, and so the tribes just wanted to make sure that they get in front of it. But it still has to play out. I'm kind of not at privilege to say what the politics behind it is right now, but it's pretty fascinating, as you can imagine. So, this is all, we will have more answers at NIGA mid-year, and that was the point, and that's why I didn't invite a lot of the tribal leaders and stuff like that, because the stuff's all still being hashed out. So maybe we'll have some firmer answers in 2 weeks at Pachanga at the National Gaming Association mid-year. But I definitely know, believe it or not, I'm starting to work on ICE in London too, because I'll be over there. We'll be talking about sports betting in the UK. So I'm sure they'll want to hear what's going on in California and the rest of the country too, because what better stories are there right now than these?
Oh,
Again,
I know New York.
oh, geez. Well, every night, before I put pachanga.net to bed, I look over the land and the landscape of the day, and you start to just see the industry really moving forward. But it's been fascinating to watch it when they start running up against tribal sovereignty, and you start to see how those interact and where they meet. In California and Florida, you see they're very aggressive. In New York, it's completely different. Yet they're still involved too. And I think yesterday they made the announcement of the licensing, and Caesars was involved, and I think the Oneidas were in there too. Am I correct?
Well, so it's not an announcement yet. A lot of sources saying what's going to happen. And as I look back on the story that Matt Rybotowski wrote for us, the super bid, which includes FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, and Ballybet, looks like it's going to get the nod to be move forward in New York. So that's 4 operators. And then potentially that there will be a second one led by Kambi, and Rush Street Interactive, Caesars, PointsBet, Win Resorts, and Resorts World are all part of that as well. So potentially, I believe 8 operators, and there are other bids out there that certainly could get accepted by the state. There was a minimum, but I don't think there's a maximum. But what I thought was interesting about it, when I looked at our story budget this week and all of the things that happened, is that last week, one of the 4 biggest states in the United States, or 2, I'm sorry, had legal sports betting, but not live. And all of a sudden, 3 of those states are in play. Florida has gone live. New York probably will be live by the Super Bowl. And California, if not in play, is certainly like a big part of the discussion. And the only one left then is Texas. Right. And it's incredibly interesting. I know this isn't all from the tribal perspective, but incredibly interesting is in those 4 states, which, account for, I guess I shouldn't even say that because I don't know, but I mean, half the population of the United States. Those 4 states, it's going to be completely different everywhere. Not only who's running sports betting, but how it's set up. And I just think that part of it goes to show you that when the Supreme Court decided to make this a states' right issue, that every state actually does operate differently and has different priorities. And then, within those states, there's even more things, Arizona, Connecticut, Michigan, California, Wisconsin with tribes. Is a whole different, way of operating things. So I just think it's a really exciting time right now, with an awful lot going on and an awful lot unknown.
And then you start adding tribal licenses and stuff like that. It just becomes infinitely more mm-hmm. fascinating and complicated. I'm glad I'm not a sports betting company from the UK or Europe and stuff trying to understand this for the first time. As a matter of fact, I know a lot of these guys, and they're just, their minds are blown. Isn't there one Indian we can talk to? Take me to your leader.
Well, even if you look at the states, right? It's 50 different or eventually, 50 or 48 different applications. Like, they're not all the same. So it is confusing.
Well, you know what, Jill? I'm going to end this a little early because we could go over, but, basically to recap is just, California is in play. We have a possibility. We have 1 qualified. We had 2 already. 1 signature is getting ready for the sports club. Another one to be done today or tomorrow. And then you have the tribes for this 4th one. So, this makes it definitely interesting in 2022. This holiday season, I'm sure if you shouldn't be able to go out without running into a signature gatherer. There'll probably be more signature gatherers than masks, I assume.
Haha.
I know. I'm sorry. I was looking for my. I
No,
had
I
a
was
joke.
gonna say, I find it really interesting that when the retail initiative, when you're out gathering signatures, I live in Southern California, about 20 minutes, obviously, from your casino in Pachanga, and about 20 minutes from Pala, half an hour from Valley View. So surrounded, right, by tribal lands. I didn't see a single signature gatherer. And I think that goes to what you were talking about, which is that as the tribes have a built-in audience, and that
Yeah.
you're doing the signature gathering on site. So it'll be really interesting to me to see. I do a lot of my grocery shopping and stuff in Oceanside where there is a card room. If I see anybody from that group, looking for signatures. And then
You will. And like I said, I've seen this before, that the tribes already have that built-in audience and they're already sympathetic to the cause. They're there. And I think the important thing to remember is that the tribes have, over 25 years in California of keeping their promise, and a lot of work to show for it too. So
I think the big thing the tribes are going to have to lobby against, I guess, going forward, if the operators initiative moves forward with signatures, is that I just wanted to point this out because we hadn't talked about it, is that their ballot initiative does not have the word sports betting in it in the title. It is a Homelessness and Mental Health Issues Act. And I did an informal poll, several actually, among parents and friends that I know, and I said, if you have these two things to vote for and you could only pick one, and I read the titles, they would pick the homelessness item. And that's because it is, as the polling has shown, it's a big issue here in California, particularly in the cities, San Francisco and Los Angeles, and somewhat in San Diego. And it resonates with people. And I know you said, I don't think so, but I have my doubts too, but we live kind of suburban, right? And in the cities, I think it's a big deal. And that I didn't point out earlier that the new potential initiative from the tribes, there's a 10% tax, for lack of a better word, on gross gaming revenue that would go to homelessness solutions as well. And I don't think we would have seen that if the commercial operators weren't doing that in the first place. I also would argue that if I'm on the tribal side, I'd want to include that in my title so that it can show that we're going down the same road too.
Yeah, I think so. But I think also once the messaging starts happening and stuff, and then these issues become more defined, it's not in a vacuum. And especially the tribes will do a really good job of labeling and identifying these. And my point was, which is just a very cynical Californian point of view, is that they would have been better off with free range chickens than homeless people, because I watch people step right over them to get their soy latte. You know what I mean? So in California, we're so used to living with the homeless. You know what I mean? It's like you go to Santa Cruz, and it's like where the young people go to retire. So yeah. It's and again, that's just a very cynical and snotty response to a very serious question, and I think that is a big issue in California, and I think we all have a real concern about that. But I think when these things start to become defined, and the tribes do have a really strong track record of taking care of themselves. So I hate for it to be the poor Indians against the poor homeless people type of stuff too, though. Before I go though, it reminds me, so in Florida, one of the things that's happened is now the Seminoles have come out with a campaign that's saying, don't sign the signatures, and that's kind of interesting too. They're being aggressive against the consortium in Florida, saying, don't sign it. I'm starting to see articles that are saying, I saw another one yesterday, college students are saying they're being harassed, their signatures are being, and that's usually from the signature gatherers and other things, because all that money and stuff like that. I remember in Nebraska a couple of years ago, the Ho-Chunks paid for it, and all those signatures were thrown out. I mean, like over half of them. It was just ridiculous. Now they ended up doing another one. This time they got real signature gatherers, and they got a call for the ballot, and they won. So I think the importance of hiring verified and good signature gatherers is very important.
Yeah, it's really messy in Florida, and it's unclear actually which signature gatherers or who the signature gatherers were representing, the ones that were chasing students at Florida International University.
Right.
It's also kind of interesting that that was happening because they're not paid by signature. They're actually paid by the hour or some other way. But yeah, there's a lot of little crazy things going on. And that seems to be actually only in South Florida. I know some people who live in North Florida and they're like, wow, really? I hadn't heard about that. So, but gaming is a big thing in South Florida. It's kind of like California, right? Southern part and northern part are completely different. So.
Yeah, as someone from California, I can't say anything bad about Florida. So, I have to keep my mouth shut. I think I'm legally obligated, so. Yeah, I think we have a couple responses here. All right. Okay. What? Just so anyhow, Jill, thanks so much. I thought that was a fascinating conversation. We'll have you back as this thing gets even more fascinating. I think you can count on this being a continuing conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And I hope everyone had a good Halloween and happy fall.
Well, look at me. I'm dressed like Steve Buscemi, so yeah.
We were in costume today. I didn't realize.
Listen, everyone, thank you very much. We'll be back next week. The week after that, we won't because I have National Game Association mid-year. But again, I'd like to thank my host, my guest, Jill Dorson from SportsHandle. And everyone, we'll see you again next week talking more about tribal gaming. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks.